Chapter 10, page 89. What a lot of graves there are, laid out as far as the eye can see. Their headstones are like hands raised in surrender, though they are beyond being threatened by anything. A city of silence and truth, where success and failure, murderer and victim come together, where thieves and policemen lie side by side in peace for the first and last time. Nurse snoring seemed likely to end only when she awoke in late afternoon. You'll stay in this prison until the police forget you. And will they ever really forget? The graves behind you that death cheats the living, or the graves remind you that death cheats the living. They speak of betrayal, and thus they make you remember Nabia, Ilish, and Raouf, telling you that you yourself are dead ever since that unseen bullet was fired. But you still have bullets of fire. At the sound of Nur's yawning, loud like a groan, he turned away from the window shutters toward the bed. Nur was sitting up, naked, her hair disheveled, looking unrested and run down. But she smiled as she said, I dreamed you were far away, and I was going out of my mind waiting for you. That was a dream, he observed grimly. In fact, you're the one who's going out, and I'm the one who will wait. She went into the bathroom, emerged again drying her hair, and he followed her hands as they recreated her face in a new form, happy and young. She was, like himself, 30 years old, but she lied outright, hoping to appear younger, adding to the multitude of sins and silliness which are openly committed. But theft, unfortunately, was not one of them. Don't forget the papers, he reminded her at the door. When she'd gone, he'd moved into the reception room and flung himself down on one of the sofas. Now he was alone in the full sense of the word, without even his books, which he'd left with Sheik Ali. He stared up at the cracked white ceiling, a dual echo of the threadbare carpet, killing time. The setting sun flashed through the open window like a jewel being carried by a flight of doves from one point in time to the next. Your coldness, Sana, was very disquieting, like seeing these graves. I don't know if we'll meet again, or where, or when. You'll certainly never love me now. Not in this life, so full of badly aimed bullets, desires gone astray. What's left behind is a dangling chain of regrets. The first link was the students' hostel on the road to Giza. Ilish didn't matter much, but Nabawiyah, she'd shaken him, torn him up by the roots. If only a deceit could be as plainly read in the face as fever or an infectious disease, then beauty would never be false, and many a man would be spared the ravages of deception. That grocery store near the students' hostel, where Nabawiyah used to come shopping, gripping her bowl. She was always so nicely dressed, much neater than the other servant girls, which is why she'd been known as the Turkish lady's maid. The rich, proud old Turkish woman who lived alone at the end of the road in a house at the center of a big garden insisted that everyone who worked for her should be good-looking, clean, and well-dressed. So Nabawiyah always appeared with her hair neatly combed and plaited in a long pigtail, and wearing slippers. Her peasant's gown flowed around a sprightly and nimble body, and even those not bewitched by her agreed that she was a fine example of country beauty with her dark complexion, her round, full face, her brown eyes, her small, chubby nose, and her lips moist with the juices of life. There was a small green tattoo mark on her chin like a beauty spot. He used to stand at that entrance to the students' hostel and wait for her after work, staring up the street until her fine form with her adorable gait appeared in the distance. As she stepped closer and closer, you'd glow with anticipation. She was like some lovely melody, welcomed wherever she went. As she slipped in among the dozens of women standing at the grocer's, your eyes would follow her, drunk with ecstasy. She'd disappear and emerge again, your desire and curiosity increasing all the time. So did your impulse to do something, no matter what, by word, gesture, or invocation. And she'd move off on her way home, to disappear for the rest of the day and another whole night. And you'd let out a long, bitter sigh, and your elation would subside. The birds on the roadside trees would cease their song, and a cold autumn breeze would suddenly spring up from nowhere. But then you notice that her form is reacting to your stare, that she's swaying coquettishly as she walks, and you stand there no longer, but with your natural impetuosity. Hurry after her along the road. Then at the lone palm tree at the edge of the fields, you bar her away. She's dumbfounded by your audacity and pretends to be, and asks you indignantly who you might be. You reply in feigned surprise, Who might I be? You really ask who I am? Don't you know? I'm known to every inch of your being. I don't like ill-mannered people, she snaps. Neither do I. I'm like you. I hate ill-mannered people. Oh no, on the contrary, I admire good manners, beauty, and gentleness. and all those things are you. You still don't know who I am? I must carry that basket for you and see you to the door of your house. I don't need your help, she says, and don't ever stand in my way again. With that, she walks away, but with you at her side, encouraged by the faint smile slipping through her pretense of indignation, which you receive like the first cold breeze on a hot and sultry night. Then she had said, "Go back, you must. My mistress sits at the window, and if you come one step more, she'll see you." "But I'm a very determined fellow," you reply, "and if you want to go back, you'll have to come along with me. Just a few steps back to the palm tree, you see. I've got to talk to you, and why shouldn't I? Am I not respectable enough?" She shakes her head vigorously, but murmuring an angry protest, she does slow down, her neck arched like an angry cat's. She did slow down, and I no longer doubt I've won that Nabia is not indifferent and knows very well how I stand sighing there at the students' hostel. You know that casual stares in the street will become something big in your life, in hers, and in the world at large, too, which will grow larger as a result. "Till tomorrow, then," you say, stopping there, afraid for her, afraid of the biting tongue of the old Turk who lives like an enigma at the bottom of the street. So you return to the palm tree and climb it, quick as a monkey out of sheer high spirits, then jump down again from 10 feet up into a plot of green. Then you go back to the hostel, singing in your deep voice like a bull in ecstasy. And later, when circumstances sent you to Al Zayat Circus to work that took you from quarter to quarter, village to village, you feared that out of sight, out of mind might be applied to you, and you asked her to marry you. Yes, you asked her to marry you in the good old legal traditional Muslim way, standing outside the university that you had unfairly been unable to enter, though so many fools did. There is no light in the street or the sky, just a big crescent moon over the horizon, gazing shyly down at the ground, her forehead rejecting the pale moonlight. She seemed full, reflecting the pale moonlight. She seemed full of happiness. You told her about your good wages, your excellent prospects, and your neat ground flat at Darasa on Jabal Road near Sheikh Ali's house. "You'll get to know the godly Sheikh," you said, "when we marry, and we've got to have the wedding as soon as possible. After all, our love has lasted quite a while already. You'll have to leave the old lady now. I am an orphan, you know. There's only my aunt at Sidi Al Arbain. That's fine." Then you kissed her under the crescent moon. The wedding was so lovely that everyone talked about it ever after. From Zayad, I got a wedding present of £10. El Sidra seemed absolutely overjoyed at it all, as if it was his own wedding, playing the part of the faithful friend while he was really no friend at all. And the oddest thing of all is that you were taken in by him. You, clever old you, smart enough to scare the devil himself. You, the hero, and Illish, your willing slave, admiring, flattering, and doing everything to avoid upsetting you, happy to pick up the scraps of your labor, your smartness. You were sure you could have sent him and Nabawiah off together alone into the very deserts where our Lord Moses wandered, and that all the time he'd keep seeing you between himself and her and would never step out of line. How could she ever give up a lion and take to a dog? She's rotten to the core, rotten enough to deserve death and damnation. For sightless bullets not to stray, blindly missing their vile and evil targets, and hit innocent people, leaving others torn with remorse and rage and on the verge of insanity, compelled to forget everything good in life. The way you used to play as a kid in the street, innocent first love, your wedding night, Sana's birth, and seeing her little face, hearing her cry, carrying her in your arms for the first time. All the smiles you never counted, how you wish you'd counted them, and how she looked. You wish it was one of the things you've forgotten, when she was frightened, that screaming of hers that shook the ground and made springs and breezes dry up. All the good feelings that ever were. The shadows are lengthening now. It's getting dark in the room and outside the window. The silence of the graves is more intense, but you can't switch on the light. The flat must look the way it always has when Nur is out. Your eyes will get used to the dark the way they did to prison, and all those ugly faces. And you can't start drinking either, lest you bump into something or shout out loud. The flat must stay as silent as the grave. Even the dead mustn't know you're here. God alone can tell how long you'll have to stay here, and how patient in this jail. Just as he alone could tell you'd kill Shaban Hussein and not El Sidra. Well, you'll have to go out sooner or later to take a walk in the night, even if only to safe places. But let's postpone that until the police are worn out looking for you. And let's hope to God Shaban Hussein isn't buried in one of these graves here. This rundown quarter could hardly stand the strain of such painful irony of fate. Just keep cool, keep patient, until Nur comes back. You must not ask when Nur will come back. You'll have to put up with the dark, the silence, and the loneliness, for as long as the world refuses to change its naughty ways. Nur, poor girl, is caught in it too. What, after all, is her love for you but a bad habit getting stuck on someone who's already dead of pain and anger? Is put off by her affection no less than by her aging looks, who doesn't really know what to do with her except maybe drink with her, toasting, as it were, defeat and grief and pity for her worthy but hopeless efforts. And in the end, you can't even forget she's a woman, like that slinking bitch Nabia, who will be in mortal fear until the rope safely installed around your neck or some rotten bullet is lodged in your heart, and the police will tell such lies that you'll be cut off forever from Sana. She'll never even know the truth of your love for her, as if that too was just a bullet that went astray. Sleep came over Syed Maran as he dozed off for a while on the sofa, unaware that he had been dreaming in his sleep until he awoke to find himself in complete darkness. Still alone in Nur's flat in Sharia Najim al-Din, where Ilsidra had not surprised him and had not fired or hailed bullets at him. He had no idea what time it was. Suddenly he heard the rattle of a key in the lock and then the door being closed. A light in the hallway went on and filtered in above the door. Nur came in smiling, carrying a big parcel. She kissed him and said, "Let's have a feast. I've brought home a restaurant, a delicatessen, and a patisserie all in one." "You've been drinking," he said as he kissed her. "I have to. It's part of my job. I'll take a bath and come back. Here are the papers for you." His eyes followed her as she left. Then he buried himself in the papers, both morning and evening. There was nothing that was news to him, but there was clearly enormous interest in both the crime and its perpetrator. Far more than he'd expected, especially in Al-Zahar, Rauf Ilman's paper. It discussed at length his history as a burglar and the list of the exploits revealed at his trial, the stories about the great houses of the rich he had burglarized, comments on his character, his latent insanity, and an analysis of the criminal boldness that finally led to bloodshed. What enormous black headlines! Thousands upon thousands must be discussing the crimes at that moment, all amused at Nabawia's infidelity and laying bets as to what his fate would be. He was the very center of the news, the man of the hour, and the thought filled him with both apprehension and pride, conflicting emotions that were so intense they almost tore him apart. Meanwhile, so many other thoughts and ideas crowded in confusion into his mind that a kind of intoxication seemed to engulf him. He felt sure he was about to do something truly extraordinary, even miraculous, and he wished he could somehow communicate with all the people outside to tell them what was making him. There, all alone in the silence, burst with emotion, to convince them that he'd win in the end, even if only after death. He was quite alone, separate from everyone else. They did not comprehend the language of silence and solitude. They didn't understand that they themselves were silent and alone sometimes, and that the mirrors dimly reflecting their own images were in fact deceptive, making them falsely imagine they were seeing people unknown to themselves. His mind's eye focused on the photograph of Sana with a sense of wonder, and he was deeply moved. Then, in his imagination, he conjured up all their pictures, his own wild-looking self, Nabawiyah looking like a whore, coming back to the picture of Sana. She was smiling, yes, smiling, because she could not see him, and because she knew nothing. He scrutinized her intensely, overwhelmed by the sense that he'd failed, that the night out there through the window was sighing in some kind of sympathetic sadness, desperately wishing he could run away with her to some place known to no one else. He yearned to see her, if only at his last wish on earth before his execution. He went over to the other sofa to pick up the scissors lying on the pile of pieces of fabric, then returned to snip the picture carefully out of the newspaper. By the time Nur emerged from the bathroom, he felt calmer. When she called him, he went to the bedroom, wondering how she could have brought him all those news reports and know nothing of them herself. She'd spent a lot of money. As he sat by her side on the sofa, facing the food-covered table, his mouth watered, and to show his pleasure, he stroked her moist hair and murmured, "You know, there aren't many women like you." She tied a red scarf around her head and began filling the glasses, smiling at the compliment. To see her sitting there, proud and confident of having him, if only for a while, made him feel somehow glad. She was wearing no makeup over her light brown skin, and she looked invigorated from her bath, like a dish of great good food, somehow, modest and fresh. "You can say things like that," she said, giving him a quizzical stare. "Sometimes I almost think the police know more about kindness than you." No, do believe me, I'm happy being with you. Truly? Yes, truly. You're so kind, so good. I don't know why anyone could resist you. Wasn't I like that in the old days? No easy victory can ever make one forget a bloody defeat. At that time, I wasn't an affectionate person. And now? Let's have a drink and enjoy ourselves, he said, picking up the glass. They set about the food and drink with gusto until she said, How did you spend your time? Between the shadows and the graves, he said, dipping a piece of meat in tahini. Do you have any family buried here? No, all mine are buried in Al Bayana. God rest their souls. Only the sounds of their eating and the clink of glasses and dishes on the tray broke the silence until Saeed said, I'm going to ask you to buy some cloth for me, something suitable for an officer's uniform. An army officer? You didn't know I learned tailoring in jail? But why do you want it? She said uneasily. Ah, well, the time has come for me to do my military service. Don't you understand? I don't want to lose you again. Don't worry about me at all, he said with extraordinary confidence. If no one had given me away, the police would never have caught me. Nur sighed, still troubled. You're not in any danger yourself, are you? Said asked, grinning, his mouth stuffed with food. No highwayman's going to waylay you in the desert, right? They laughed together, and she leaned over and kissed him full on the lips. Their lips were equally sticky. The truth is, she said, that to live at all we've got to be afraid of nothing. Not even death? Said said, nodding toward the window. Listen, I even forget that too when time brings me together with someone I love. Astonished at the strength and tenacity of her affection, Saeed relaxed and let himself feel a mixture of compassion, respect, and gratitude toward Nur. A moth overhead made love to a naked light bulb in the dead of the night.